At midnight under a cold African rain, Habiba stood barefoot in the mud, clutching her three trembling children as her husband, Sadiq Bello, hurled their last bag into the street and slammed the door without looking back. The youngest cried for food, his voice breaking in the dark, but Habiba had nothing left to give. No home, no help, no hope. Then out of nowhere a passing bus slowed down. Its headlights cut through the rain, and the driver didn't just glance at her. He stared as if he already knew her story.
Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it in your country? If stories like this move you, take a moment to subscribe and stay with us.
Habiba Bello had once believed that love could survive anything, even poverty. Every morning before sunrise, while the city of Kano still stretched itself awake under a pale orange sky, Habiba was already on her feet. She would wrap her faded scarf around her head, sweep the small courtyard, and prepare the simplest breakfast she could manage, usually watery pap and a few leftover crumbs of bread. Her three children, Amina the eldest at 10, Yusuf at 7, and little Zainab, barely 4, would sit close together on the worn mat, their eyes following every movement of their mother's hands as if hoping she might somehow make more food appear. Habiba always smiled anyway. She would hum softly sometimes an old Hausa lullaby her own mother used to sing, even when her stomach ached from hunger. She made sure her children ate first. She always ate last if there was anything left. To the outside world it looked like a struggling but ordinary family. But inside the walls of their small, crumbling house, something had begun to change. Sadiq Bello, her husband of 12 years, had once been a gentleman. When they first married, he would bring home small gifts, ground nuts wrapped in paper, colorful bangles from the market, and laugh easily, his eyes full of dreams. Back then he worked as a sales clerk in a modest electronics shop, and though money was tight, there was still warmth in the home. Habiba remembered those days clearly. She remembered how he used to sit outside in the evenings, holding baby Amina in his arms, telling stories about the future, how he would one day open his own business, how his children would go to good schools, how Habiba would never have to worry again. But dreams, she had learned, could quietly fade. It began slowly. At first, Sadiq started coming home later than usual. He would avoid eye contact, muttering brief answers when Habiba asked where he had been. Some nights he wouldn't eat at all. Other nights he would complain about the food, pushing the plate away as if it offended him. "This is all you could make," he once said, his voice sharp. "Do you expect a man to survive on this?" Habiba had lowered her eyes, her fingers tightening around the edge of her wrapper. She wanted to explain that there was no money left, that she had stretched what little they had as far as she could, but the words never came out. Instead, she whispered, "I will try harder." She always said that, "I will try harder," but no matter how hard she tried, it was never enough. The tension in the house began to grow like a silent storm. The children felt it too. Amina, though still young, had learned to read the room. She would gather her younger siblings close whenever their father entered, as if her small body could shield them from something she didn't fully understand. Yusuf became quieter, his once playful nature replaced by cautious silence. Even little Zainab stopped laughing as freely as she used to. Habiba noticed everything, and it broke her heart. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the narrow street, Habiba sat outside, mending a tear in Yusuf's shirt. The fabric was so worn that her needle slipped through it too easily, as if the cloth itself had given up. That was when she heard voices. Two women from the neighborhood stood just beyond the gate, their conversation low, but not low enough. "I saw him yesterday," one of them whispered. Where the other asked, "At that big restaurant near the main road. He wasn't alone." Habiba's hands froze. "Who was with him?" "A woman," the first replied. "Not from around here. She looked rich, well-dressed, gold jewelry, expensive shoes, the kind of woman who doesn't even notice people like us." There was a pause. "Are you sure it was Sadiq? I know what I saw." Habiba's chest tightened, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and fear. She told herself it wasn't true. It couldn't be true. Sadiq was her husband, the father of her children, the man she had built her life around. But that night when he returned home, something in his eyes confirmed what her heart didn't want to accept. He smelled different, not like the dust and sweat of long workdays, but something sharper, something unfamiliar. And his clothes, they looked newer than anything he had worn in months. "Where were you?" Habiba asked softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Sadiq didn't answer immediately. He walked past her, dropped onto the worn chair and loosened his collar as if the question itself annoyed him. "At work," he said flatly. Habiba hesitated. For this long, that was when he looked at her. Really looked at her. And in that moment she saw something she had never seen before: irritation, and something colder. "Why are you questioning me?" he snapped. "Since when did you become my supervisor?" "I was just worried," she said quickly. "Well, don't be," he replied. "Just do your job and take care of the house." The words hit her harder than he probably intended. Just do your job, as if she were nothing more than a servant in her own home. Habiba lowered her head again, swallowing the pain that rose in her throat. She wanted to argue, to demand answers, but she knew better. Every time she tried, it only made things worse. So she stayed silent. Days turned into weeks. Sadiq's behavior didn't improve. It deepened. He began criticizing everything. The house was too dirty. The children were too noisy. The food was too bland. Habiba was too slow, too careless, too everything. Nothing she did was right anymore. One afternoon, when Yusuf accidentally spilled water on the floor, Sadiq's reaction shocked them all. "Can't you control your children?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the small house. "They are just children," Habiba said gently, reaching for a cloth to clean the mess. "That's your excuse for everything," he snapped. "Children, children, children, that's all you ever talk about. What have you done for this family?" Habiba froze. The question felt like a slap. What had she done? She had given up everything: her dreams, her comfort, her dignity, to hold this family together. But none of that mattered now. "I am trying," she whispered again. Sadiq laughed bitterly. "Trying," he said. "Your trying is what is killing this family." The words hung in the air long after he walked out. That night, Habiba lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling while her children slept beside her. The room felt smaller than ever, as if the walls themselves were closing in. For the first time, a quiet fear settled deep in her heart. Not just fear of poverty, but fear of losing something far more fragile: her home. Because somewhere beneath the anger, the silence and the distance, Habiba could feel Sadiq was already slipping away, and she didn't know how to stop it. The change in Sadiq Bello was no longer something Habiba could ignore or explain away. It had moved beyond silence, beyond late nights and cold replies. It had become something visible, something that followed her into the market, into the mosque courtyard, into every whispered conversation that stopped the moment she walked past. People were talking, and in a place like Kano, where lives were lived close together and secrets rarely stayed hidden, whispers could cut deeper than knives. Habiba first felt it fully one humid afternoon at the local market. She had gone there with a small basket, hoping to buy vegetables on credit from a kind old woman who sometimes took pity on her. The air was thick with the smell of spices, dried fish, and dust rising under the weight of many feet. Traders called out loudly, trying to attract customers, while children weaved through the crowd, chasing each other with carefree laughter. It used to be a place Habiba enjoyed. Now it felt different. As she approached the vegetable stall, two women standing nearby fell silent. One of them glanced at her quickly, then looked away, pretending to focus on the tomatoes in her hand. Habiba greeted them politely. "Peace be upon you." "And upon you," they replied, but their voices lacked warmth. She turned to the old woman selling vegetables. "Mama Sadia, please. Can I take some today? I will pay you in a few days." The old woman hesitated, just for a moment. But Habiba noticed. Before, Mama Sadia would nod without question, sometimes even adding an extra onion or pepper into the basket. But today, her eyes flickered, uncertain, calculating. "Habiba," she said slowly, "you still owe me from last week." "I know," Habiba replied quickly. "I will pay, I promise. The children have not eaten well." Her voice trailed off. Mama Sadia sighed clearly, torn between kindness and caution. Before she could respond, one of the women nearby spoke, her tone low, but sharp enough to be heard. "Maybe she should ask her husband," the woman said. "He seems to have money these days." The other woman gave a short, dry laugh. Habiba's grip tightened around her basket. She turned slowly. "What do you mean?" The first woman shrugged, feigning innocence. "Nothing. Just saying what people are saying." "What people?" Habiba asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The second woman stepped forward slightly, her eyes scanning Habiba from head to toe. The worn clothes, the tired face, the quiet dignity that still clung to her despite everything. "They say your husband has found someone else," she said bluntly. "A rich woman. Zainab Lawal." The name landed like a stone in Habiba's chest. Zainab Lawal. She had heard it before. Not directly, never spoken to her face, but in passing, in fragments of gossip that she had tried to ignore. Now it was being said. Openly. In fact, the woman continued. Some people saw them together at a restaurant near the main road. Eating, laughing, like a husband and wife. The words blurred together in Habiba's ears. For a moment, the sounds of the market faded. The shouting, the footsteps, the bargaining voices, all of it became distant, as if she were standing underwater. "That is not true," she said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. The women exchanged a look. "If you say so," one of them replied with a shrug. "But in this town, truth has a way of showing itself." They turned away, leaving Habiba standing there, her basket still empty. Mama Sadia reached out gently. "My daughter." "Take these," she said, placing a few vegetables into the basket. "Pay me when you can." Habiba nodded, unable to speak. "May God give you strength," the old woman added softly. Habiba forced a small smile. "Amin." But inside, something had already begun to crack. That evening, Habiba returned home earlier than usual. The children sat quietly in the corner, drawing shapes in the dust with their fingers. Amina looked up first. "Mama, did you bring food?" Habiba nodded and handed her the small bundle. "Yes, my child. Help me prepare it." As they worked together in silence, Habiba's mind kept replaying the words from the market. A rich woman. Eating together. Laughing like husband and wife. She tried to push the thoughts away, to focus on the simple rhythm of cutting vegetables and stirring the pot. But the images refused to leave her. When Sadiq finally arrived that night, the air in the room changed instantly. The children went quiet. Habiba stood still, her hands damp from washing dishes. Sadiq stepped inside, his expression unreadable. He looked around briefly, then sat down without greeting anyone. Habiba took a deep breath. She had spent the entire walk home telling herself she would ask him, calmly, respectfully, like a wife who still believed in her marriage. "Sadiq." She began, her voice careful. "I need to ask you something." He didn't look at her. "What is it?" "I went to the market today," she said. "People are talking." He gave a small, dismissive snort. "People always talk. That is their job. This is different," she insisted gently. "They mentioned a name. That got his attention. Slowly, He lifted his head. What name? Habiba swallowed. Zainab Lawal. The silence that followed was heavy, thick enough to feel. Sadiq's eyes hardened. And what about it, he asked. Habiba's heart began to race. They said you have been seen with her. She continued, her voice trembling slightly. That you are spending time with her. Sadiq let out a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. So now you believe everything you hear in the market, he said. I am asking you, Habiba replied, her eyes searching his face. Is it true? For a moment it seemed like he might deny it, but instead something shifted in his expression. Not guilt, not shame. Something closer to defiance. What if it is? He said finally. The words struck like lightning. Habiba felt her knees weaken, but she forced herself to remain standing. What do you mean? She whispered. Sadiq leaned back in his chair, his gaze cold. I mean, he said slowly, that maybe I am tired of living like this. Tired of struggling every day. Tired of coming home to complaints and nothing to show for it. Habiba stared at him, disbelief flooding her eyes. I have never complained, she said. He waved a hand dismissively. You don't need to say it. I can see it. This life, this poverty, it is suffocating. And you think another woman will fix that? Habiba asked, her voice breaking. At least she understands what it means to live well, Sadiq snapped. She doesn't drag me down with problems every day. The room went silent. Even the children stopped moving, their eyes wide as they watched the exchange. Habiba felt something inside her shatter. After everything, she said softly, after all these years, this is what I am to you. Sadiq stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. You are what you have always been, he said harshly. A woman who cannot help her husband rise. The words hung in the air like poison. Amina began to cry quietly. Yusuf moved closer to his mother, gripping her wrapper tightly. Little Zainab clung to her leg, confused and frightened. Habiba looked at her children, then back at the man she once loved. Her voice, when she spoke again, was barely audible. I have given you everything I had. Sadiq's expression didn't change. Then, maybe it was never enough. He turned and walked out, leaving the door slightly open behind him. The sound of his footsteps faded into the night. Habiba stood there unmoving as the weight of his words settled over her. For the first time, the truth became impossible to deny. She was no longer fighting to save her marriage. She was standing alone in it, and somewhere deep inside, a quiet realization began to form. The man she had built her life around was already gone. What remained was only the shadow of who he used to be. The night everything broke did not begin with shouting. It began with silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that settled over the small house like a storm waiting to explode. Habiba felt it the moment she woke up that morning. The air was different, still, as if something had already been decided even before a single word was spoken. Sadiq had not come home the night before. That alone was no longer surprising. But this time, something inside Habiba told her it was different. She went about her day, quietly, forcing herself into routine. She swept the floor, fetched water from the communal tap, and prepared a small meal for the children. Amina helped without being asked. Yusuf stayed unusually quiet. Even little Zainab seemed to sense that something was wrong. Mama Amina whispered at one point, "Is Baba coming back today?" Habiba paused. She wanted to say yes. She wanted to reassure her daughter the way she always did. But the word caught in her throat. "I don't know," she said softly. And for the first time, she did not pretend otherwise. The day dragged on slowly, each hour stretching longer than the last. The sun rose high, burned hot over the dusty rooftops, then began its slow descent. Still Sadiq did not return. By evening, the children had eaten what little food was left. Habiba saved nothing for herself. She couldn't eat anyway. Her mind was too restless, her heart too heavy. Then, just as darkness began to fall, she heard footsteps outside. Not the hurried, uneven steps she had grown used to. These were steady, confident, deliberate. Habiba stood up immediately, her body tense. The door creaked open, and there he was, Sadiq Bello. But something about him was different. He looked composed, clean, almost polished in a way that felt out of place in their worn-down home. His shirt was neatly pressed, his shoes recently cleaned. There was even a faint scent of expensive cologne lingering around him. Habiba's chest tightened. He didn't look like a man who had spent the night struggling. He looked like a man who had been somewhere else entirely. "Where were you?" she asked quietly. Sadiq closed the door behind him, without answering. He glanced around the room as if assessing it, taking in the cracked walls, the dim light, the worn furniture. Then he sighed, a deep, impatient sigh. "I can't keep doing this," he muttered. Habiba frowned slightly. "Doing what this?" he said, gesturing vaguely around the house. "Living like this, pretending this is a life." The words stung, but Habiba forced herself to stay calm. "This is our home," she said. "It may not be much, but it is nothing," Sadiq cut in sharply. "Let's stop lying to ourselves." The children had gone completely still. Amina instinctively pulled Yusuf and Zainab closer, her eyes wide with fear. Habiba stepped forward slightly. "Sadiq, please." "The children, I am tired of hearing about the children," he snapped. "Everything is always about them." "What about me?" Habiba blinked in shock. "What about you?" she repeated. "We have all been struggling together." "No," Sadiq said, shaking his head. "I have been struggling, carrying this family," and for what his voice rose with each word. "For this," he added, pointing at the empty cooking pot, "for a house that is falling apart, for a life that is going nowhere." Habiba felt her hands begin to tremble. "We are doing our best," she said. "Things will get better." When he shouted, when Habiba. After how many more years of this misery, the room fell silent again. But this time the silence was sharp, dangerous. Habiba took a slow breath, trying to steady herself. "We can find a way," she said gently. "Together." Sadiq let out a bitter laugh. "There is no together anymore," he said. The words hit like a sudden blow. Habiba stared at him. "What do you mean?" He walked toward the small wooden shelf in the corner and picked up his bag. The one he rarely used, the one that had been empty for months. Now it was full, packed, ready. "I mean, I am done," he said simply. Habiba's heart dropped. "Done." "With what? With this marriage," Sadiq replied. "With this life, with everything." The children began to cry softly. "Mama," Yusuf whispered. Habiba shook her head slightly, trying to calm them, but her eyes never left Sadiq. "You can't mean that," she said. "You are their father, and I will still be their father," he said coldly. "But I refuse to keep living like this." "And what about us?" Habiba asked, her voice breaking. "Where are we supposed to go?" Sadiq didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the door, opened it, and stepped aside. "You need to leave," he said. The words didn't register at first. "Leave," Habiba echoed. "Yes," he replied. "Take your things, take the children, go wherever you want." Habiba felt the ground shift beneath her. "This is our home," she said, her voice shaking. "You cannot just throw us out." "I can," Sadiq said flatly. "And I am." Tears filled Habiba's eyes. "Sadiq, please," she whispered. "Think about what you are doing." "I have thought about it," he replied. "More than you know." The calmness in his voice was more terrifying than anger. It meant he had already made his decision. There was no changing it. "Where will we go?" she asked again, desperation creeping into her tone. "That is not my problem," he said. Something inside Habiba broke. Not loudly, not violently, but quietly. Like something fragile finally giving way under too much pressure. Without another word, she turned and began gathering their belongings. There wasn't much. A few clothes, a thin blanket, some small items the children held onto as if they were treasures. Amina helped silently, her face wet with tears, but her movements steady. Yusuf clung to Habiba's side, refusing to let go. Little Zainab cried openly now, her small voice filling the room with grief. "Baba, please don't send us away," she sobbed. Sadiq didn't respond, he didn't even look at her. When everything was packed, Habiba stood still for a moment, her eyes scanning the room. This place had held her memories, her hopes, her life. Now it was no longer hers. She stepped toward the door, her children close beside her. But just as she crossed the threshold, Sadiq picked up the last bag and threw it outside, letting it land in the dirt with a dull thud. "Take everything," he said, "and don't come back." Then he slammed the door, hard. The sound echoed into the night. Habiba stood frozen for a second, staring at the closed door. Waiting, hoping. But it did not open again. The rain began to fall, shortly after. Slow at first, then heavier. Within minutes they were soaked. Habiba pulled her children close, shielding them as best she could. But there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. The street was quiet, dark, empty, except for them, a mother and her 3 children, standing in the rain, with nowhere left to call home. And somewhere in the distance, the faint sound of an engine began to grow louder. The rain did not stop. It fell steadily through the night, soaking the earth beneath Habiba's feet, until the ground turned soft and heavy, clinging to her bare soles with every step she took. Her wrapper was drenched, her scarf slipping loose as strands of wet hair clung to her face. But she didn't stop moving. She couldn't. Her children were shivering. Amina held Zainab tightly against her chest, trying to shield her from the cold. Yusuf walked close to Habiba, his small hand gripping hers so tightly that his fingers had gone stiff. "Mama, where are we going?" he asked, his voice trembling. Habiba didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, she didn't know. She had never imagined a moment like this, never prepared for it. In her mind, no matter how difficult life became, there had always been one certainty: they had a home. Now that certainty was gone. "We will find a place," she said, finally forcing calm into her voice. "Just stay close to me." They walked aimlessly through the dimly lit street, passing closed shops, darkened houses, and empty corners where stray dogs curled into themselves to escape the rain. Occasionally, a car would pass, its headlights sweeping over them briefly, before disappearing into the night, taking with it any chance of being seen, of being helped. Habiba noticed how people looked away. Even those who saw them clearly saw the children. The bags, the desperation, chose not to stop. She didn't blame them. Everyone had their own struggles. Still, it hurt. After what felt like hours, Habiba spotted a bus stop ahead, a simple shelter made of rusted metal, and a narrow wooden bench beneath it. It wasn't much, but it was something. "Let's go there," she said. They hurried toward it. The roof offered just enough cover to keep the rain from falling directly on them, though the wind still carried cold droplets inside. Habiba helped the children sit on the bench, then spread the thin blanket over their shoulders. Amina pulled Zainab closer. Yusuf leaned against Habiba, his head resting against her arm. "Mama, I'm cold," Zainab whispered weakly. Habiba kissed her forehead. "I know, my child. Just stay close." She rubbed their arms gently, trying to create warmth where there was none. Minutes passed. Then more. Time moved differently in the cold. Every second felt longer, heavier. At some point, Zainab fell asleep, her small body still trembling slightly. Yusuf followed soon after exhaustion, overcoming fear. Amina stayed awake the longest, her eyes scanning the empty road as if expecting something, or someone. "Mama," she said quietly, "will Baba come back for us?" The question cut deep. Habiba hesitated, her heart aching. "No," she said softly. Amina swallowed, then nodded. She didn't ask again. Eventually, she too drifted into a restless sleep. Habiba remained awake. She couldn't afford not to. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road, her mind racing with thoughts she couldn't silence. Where would they go in the morning? How would she feed them? What would she do next? For the first time in her life, she felt completely lost. Not just uncertain, but truly lost. Then, a sound broke through the quiet. Low at first, distant, the hum of an engine. Habiba lifted her head slightly, her body tensing. Headlights appeared at the far end of the road, cutting through the darkness and rain. The light grew brighter as the vehicle approached, illuminating the wet pavement, the scattered puddles, the fragile shelter where she sat. It was a bus, old but still running. It slowed as it neared the stop. Habiba held her breath. The bus wasn't crowded. In fact, it looked almost empty. As it came to a halt, the doors opened with a soft, mechanical hiss. For a moment, nothing happened. Habiba didn't move. She wasn't sure why the bus had stopped. There were no passengers waiting, no signal, no reason. Then she saw him. The driver. He sat behind the wheel, his face partially shadowed by the dim interior light. But even from where she stood, she could feel his gaze. Focused, steady, not passing, not careless. He was looking directly at her children, at everything she was trying so hard to hold together. Habiba felt a sudden unease. She shifted slightly, pulling the blanket tighter around the children. The driver didn't speak, didn't gesture. He simply watched. Seconds stretched into silence. Then slowly, he leaned slightly toward the open door, his voice calm but firm. "Are you getting in?" Habiba blinked. The question caught her off guard. I don't have money," she replied honestly, her voice low. The man studied her for a moment. Then he said something unexpected. "I didn't ask if you had money." Habiba hesitated. Her instinct was to refuse, to stay where she was, to avoid depending on a stranger. But she looked down at her children, at their fragile, exhausted bodies, their faces pale from cold and hunger. She had no choice. Carefully, she helped Amina wake up. "Stand up, my child," she whispered. "We are going inside." Amina nodded, still half asleep, and gently woke Yusuf. Together they lifted Zainab, who stirred weakly in her sleep. Habiba gathered their bags, her movements slow and cautious. Then, one step at a time, she led them toward the bus. The driver watched without interruption. As they climbed inside, the warmth, however slight, felt like relief against their cold skin. Habiba guided the children to a seat near the middle, helping them settle down again. They huddled together under the blanket, their breathing gradually calming. She remained standing for a moment, unsure of what to do next. Then she looked toward the front. "Thank you," she said quietly. The driver gave a small nod. "What is your name?" he asked. Habiba hesitated. "Habiba." She answered. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted just slightly. "And yours?" she asked. He paused, then replied, "Musa." Habiba nodded. She didn't ask anything else. The bus began to move again, pulling away from the empty street and back onto the road. The sound of the engine filled the space, steady and rhythmic. For the first time that night, Habiba allowed herself to sit. She leaned back against the worn seat, her body finally beginning to relax just a little. but her mind remained alert, because something about the driver felt different, not threatening, but not ordinary either. He didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't try to make conversation. He simply drove. Occasionally, his eyes would flicker toward the mirror, just long enough to check on them, not in curiosity, but in quiet observation, as if he were trying to understand something, or remember something. Habiba noticed, and though she said nothing, a strange feeling settled in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite explain, because the way he had looked at her, back at the bus stop, and even now it didn't feel like the look of a stranger. It felt like the look of someone who already knew her story, and was waiting for something. The bus did not take them home, because Habiba no longer had one. Instead, it carried them through the sleeping city, past silent streets and flickering streetlights, into areas Habiba had never paid much attention to before. Places that looked different at night, quieter, emptier, stripped of their daytime noise and movement. Habiba sat still, her children pressed close to her, their bodies slowly warming under the thin blanket. Every now and then she glanced toward the front of the bus, where Musa remained focused on the road, his hands steady on the wheel. She did not ask where he was taking them. Perhaps she was too tired. Or perhaps she had reached a point where trust, even in uncertainty, felt easier than fear. After some time, she couldn't tell how long the bus slowed and turned into a dimly lit area behind a row of closed shops. It wasn't a busy terminal, nor a proper station, just an open space where a few old buses were parked for the night. The engine finally went quiet. For a moment, there was only the soft sound of rain hitting the metal roof. Musa stood up from his seat. "You can stay here tonight," he said simply. Habiba blinked. "Here," she repeated. He nodded. "It is dry. Safer than the street." Habiba looked around. The bus interior was worn but sheltered. The seats were old, the windows slightly fogged from the damp air, but it was still better than the cold bench at the bus stop. "Thank you," she said, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. Musa didn't respond immediately. He stepped down from the driver's seat and walked toward the exit, then paused. "There is water in the container near the front," he added, "and a cloth. Use it if you need." Habiba nodded again. "Thank you." He lingered for a second, as if he wanted to say something more. But then he didn't. He stepped off the bus and disappeared into the darkness. Habiba watched the doorway for a moment, listening to his footsteps fade away. Then she turned back to her children. "Lie down," she whispered softly. "Try to sleep." Amina adjusted the blanket, helping Yusuf and Zainab settle more comfortably across the seats. Within minutes, exhaustion pulled them back into sleep. Habiba remained awake a little longer. She walked to the front of the bus and found the container Musa had mentioned. The water was cool, clean. She dipped the cloth and gently wiped the mud from her children's faces one by one, her touch soft and careful. When she reached Zainab, the little girl stirred slightly. "Mama," she murmured. "I'm here," Habiba whispered. Zainab relaxed again. Habiba's chest tightened. For a moment, tears filled her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. She couldn't afford to break down. Not now, not when her children needed her to be strong. Finally, she returned to her seat and leaned back, closing her eyes. Sleep came slowly, uneven, but it came. Morning arrived quietly. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a damp gray sky that slowly brightened as the sun rose. The city began to stir again. Distant voices, the rumble of early vehicles, the faint sounds of life returning. Habiba woke to the soft movement of Amina shifting beside her. Mama, Amina whispered, "It's morning." Habiba nodded and sat up, her body stiff from the night. She glanced around the bus, momentarily disoriented, until everything came rushing back. The house, Sadiq, the rain, the street, her reality. Yusuf rubbed his eyes while Zainab sat up slowly, her small face still tired but calmer than the night before. "Mama, are we going home?" she asked. Habiba forced a gentle smile. "We will find a place," she said again. She had no other answer. Just then, footsteps approached the bus. Habiba turned toward the door. Musa appeared carrying a small plastic bag. He stepped inside without hesitation. "I brought some food," he said. Habiba stood up quickly. "You didn't have to. They are children," he interrupted quietly, placing the bag on the seat. "They need to eat." Habiba hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you." Inside the bag were simple items: bread-boiled eggs and a small bottle of water. Nothing extravagant. But to Habiba, it felt like something far greater. Amina's eyes lit up. "Mama." Habiba handed the food to them. "Eat slowly," she said. The children didn't need to be told twice. They ate eagerly, but quietly, as if afraid the food might disappear if they moved too fast. Musa stood near the front, watching them, not with pity but with something else, something thoughtful, measured. After a few minutes, Habiba looked up at him. "I don't know how to repay you," she said. "You don't need to," he replied. "But what will you do now?" he asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. Habiba paused. "I will find work," she said. "Anything. I just need a chance." Musa studied her face for a moment. "You are not afraid?" he asked. Habiba gave a small, tired smile. "I am," she admitted, "but I don't have the luxury to stop." Something in her answer seemed to settle in his mind. He nodded once. "There is a transport yard not far from here," he said. "They sometimes take people as conductors." Habiba frowned slightly. "A conductor," he nodded. "It is not easy work, and they don't usually accept women." Habiba looked down at her children, then back at him. "I will try," she said firmly. Musa held her gaze for a second longer. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of paper. He wrote something on it, an address. "Go there," he said, handing it to her. "Ask for Baba Karim." Habiba took the paper carefully as if it were something fragile. "Thank you," she said again. Musa didn't respond. He simply stepped back toward the door. Before leaving, he paused briefly. "Not everyone who falls stays down," he said. Then he stepped off the bus. Habiba watched him go. This time his words stayed with her. "Not everyone who falls stays down." She looked at the paper in her hand, then at her children. Something shifted inside her. For the first time since that night, the feeling wasn't just fear. It was something else. Something small, but real. Hope. Later that morning, Habiba stood outside the transport yard. It was loud, chaotic, filled with the sounds of engines shouting, drivers, and constant movement. Men moved quickly between buses, calling out destinations, arguing over passengers loading goods. It was not a place she had ever imagined herself, and certainly not a place that welcomed women. A few men glanced at her as she entered. Some frowned. Others laughed quietly. "What is she doing here?" one muttered. Habiba ignored them. She tightened her grip on her children's hands and walked forward, one step at a time, until she reached a small office at the far end of the yard. She knocked. A rough voice answered from inside. "Enter." Habiba took a breath, then opened the door. This moment, this decision would change everything. The office smelled of engine oil dust and something older, like years of hard work, pressed into the walls. Habiba stepped inside slowly, her children close behind her. The room was small, cluttered with papers, tools, and a metal desk that had seen better days. Behind it sat a broad-shouldered man with a graying beard and sharp, watchful eyes. He didn't greet her. He simply looked up and stared. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the distant rumble of buses outside. "What do you want?" the man asked. Finally, his voice deep and rough. Habiba swallowed. "My name is Habiba Bello," she said. "I was told to come here, to ask for work." The man leaned back slightly, studying her from head to toe. The worn clothes, the tired eyes, the 3 children standing behind her. "Who sent you?" he asked. She hesitated, then answered honestly. "A man named Musa." The man's expression shifted just slightly. Not surprise, not recognition exactly, but something close. He tapped his fingers lightly on the desk, thinking. Then he nodded once. "What kind of work do you think you can do here?" he asked. "Anything," Habiba replied quickly. "I can clean, carry, help passengers. I just need a chance." The man raised an eyebrow. "You have ever worked in transport before, no? You know how to handle drivers, conduct routes, deal with passengers who don't want to pay." Habiba shook her head. "No," she admitted, "but I can learn." The man let out a short, humorless laugh. "Learn," he repeated. "This place is not a school." He leaned forward, his voice sharpening. "This is where men fight for money every day. You think they will go easy on you because you are a woman." Habiba didn't flinch. "I am not asking for easy," she said quietly. "I am asking for work." The man held her gaze. There was something in her eyes, not desperation alone, but determination, the kind that didn't break easily. Still, he shook his head. "I don't take women," he said bluntly, "especially not ones with children following them around." Habiba felt the words hit, but she didn't step back. "Please," she said, her voice steady. "Give me one day. If I fail, I will leave." The man looked at her children again. Amina stood straight, trying to appear strong. Yusuf clung to Habiba's side. Zainab hid slightly behind her sister. The man exhaled slowly. "You are stubborn," he muttered. Habiba said nothing. He reached for a small notebook, flipping through its pages. Then he stopped, closed it, and looked up again. "One day," he said. "That is all you get." Relief washed over Habiba so quickly, it almost made her weak. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "You haven't started." He stood up, his presence filling the small room. "My name is Baba Karim," he added. "You will follow instructions. You don't argue. You don't slow anyone down." "Yes," Habiba said. He walked toward the door and opened it. "Come," he said. Habiba turned to her children. "Stay close," she whispered. They followed. Outside, the noise of the transport yard hit them immediately. Engines roared, drivers shouted destinations, conductors banged on bus doors calling for passengers. City center, move fast. Last seat, last seat." The energy was overwhelming. Habiba felt it press against her, but she didn't retreat. Baba Karim led her to an old bus parked near the edge of the yard. "You will work with him," he said, pointing toward a tall man leaning against the side of the bus. The man looked up as they approached. He was younger than Baba Karim, but his expression was harder, sharp eyes, tight jaw, a look that suggested he didn't have patience for nonsense. "Nasir, Baba Karim said this woman will assist you today." Nasir stared at Habiba, then laughed. "You're joking," he said. "I am not," Baba Karim replied. Nasir shook his head. "She won't last 1 hour, then we will find out," Baba Karim said calmly. Nasir looked back at Habiba, his gaze openly skeptical. "You ever done this before?" he asked. "No," she answered. He smirked. "Then today will be your last day," he said. Habiba didn't respond. Baba Karim stepped closer to her. "Your job is simple," he said. "Call passengers, collect fares, keep order. Don't let anyone cheat you." Habiba nodded. "Understood." "Good," he said. "Then start." He walked away without another word. Habiba stood beside the bus, her heart pounding. Nasir climbed into the driver's seat. "Well," he called out, "are you going to stand there or work?" Habiba took a step forward, then another. She raised her voice hesitantly at first. "Passengers. Going to city center." No one stopped. Her voice was too soft, too uncertain. Nasir leaned out the window. Louder, he shouted. "No one will hear you like that," Habiba swallowed. Then tried again. "City center. Going to city center." A few people glanced her way, but still no one approached. Laughter rose from nearby drivers. "Look at her," one said. "She thinks this is a game." Habiba felt heat rise to her face, but she didn't stop. She stepped closer to the road, raised her voice again. "City center, fast trip come." This time a man approached slowly. How much, he asked. Habiba hesitated. She didn't know. Nasir sighed loudly from inside the bus. "Tell him the price," he shouted. Habiba turned to him. "What is it?" Nasir rolled his eyes and shouted the fare. Habiba repeated it. The man nodded and climbed in. It was only one passenger, but it was something. Habiba kept going, calling, gesturing, trying. Some ignored her, some laughed, but slowly. A few more people came, one by one, seat by seat, until the bus was half full. Nasir glanced back. His expression had changed slightly. Not impressed, but no longer dismissive. "Close the door," he said. Habiba moved quickly and did as told. The bus started, and with it her first real step into a new life. The day was harder than anything she had ever done. Passengers argued. Some refused to pay. Others insulted her openly. A woman doing this job once scoffed. "What has this world become?" Habiba said nothing. She stood her ground, collected fares, kept moving. By midday her feet ached. Her voice was hoarse. Her body felt heavy. But she didn't stop. Every time she felt like giving up, she thought of her children, of their empty stomachs, of the cold night behind them. And she kept going. By evening, the bus returned to the yard. Habiba stepped down slowly, exhaustion written across her face. Nasir climbed out after her. He looked at her for a moment, then nodded once. "You didn't run," he said. Habiba managed a faint smile. "I told you," she replied quietly. "I can learn." Nasir didn't respond. But this time he didn't laugh. Across the yard, Baba Karim watched silently, and from a distance unseen by most another pair of eyes observed everything. Calm, patient, intent, Musa. And in his gaze there was no longer just curiosity. There was recognition, as if something he had been waiting for had finally begun. The second day began before the sun had fully risen. Habiba woke to the distant sound of engines coughing to life, metal clanging against metal, and men's voices cutting through the cool morning air. For a moment she forgot where she was. Then she opened her eyes. The bus, the thin seats. Her children curled beside her, still asleep under the worn blanket. Reality returned quietly, but firmly. She sat up slowly, careful not to wake them too suddenly. Her body ached from the previous day. Her feet were sore, her voice still rough, her muscles heavy as if they had carried more than just her weight. But there was no time to rest. Not anymore. "Amina," she whispered gently, touching her daughter's shoulder. Amina stirred, then opened her eyes. For a split second, confusion flickered across her face until she remembered everything too. "Mama," she said softly. "It's morning," Habiba replied. "We need to get ready." Amina nodded and carefully woke Yusuf and Zainab. The younger ones were slower still, clinging to sleep, but eventually they sat up, their faces tired yet calmer than the night they had been thrown out. Habiba noticed that. The fear had not disappeared, but it had softened, just a little, and that gave her strength. She helped them wash their faces using the remaining water from the container, smoothing Zainab's hair back into small braids, adjusting Yusuf's shirt, and tying Amina's scarf neatly. "You must stay together," she told them quietly, "and stay where I can see you." "Yes, Mama," they replied in unison. By the time the yard came fully alive, Habiba was already standing beside the bus again. Nasir arrived shortly after glancing at her briefly. "You came back," he said. Habiba nodded. "I said I would." He studied her for a moment, then climbed into the driver's seat without another word. But this time there was no laughter, no mockery, just quiet acceptance. The work resumed immediately. City center, move fast, no delay. Habiba called out her voice, still rough but stronger than the day before. This time she didn't hesitate, didn't wait. She moved with more confidence, stepping closer to the road, making eye contact with potential passengers, repeating the route with clarity. People still stared, some still whispered. But something had changed. She no longer shrank under their gaze. She stood firm, and, slowly, it made a difference. Passengers began to respond more quickly. Not because they respected her yet, but because she carried herself differently. More certain, more present. By the time the bus filled up, Nasir gave a small nod from his seat. "Better," he muttered. Habiba didn't smile, but inside she felt it. A small victory. The day unfolded in a blur of movement. Stops, voices, arguments, coins exchanging hands. Habiba learned quickly. She memorized fares, anticipated when passengers might try to avoid payment, stood her ground when necessary. At one stop, a man tried to push past her without paying. "Excuse me," Habiba said firmly, stepping in his way. "I don't have time," the man snapped. "You don't have a ride without paying," she replied. The man frowned clearly, not expecting resistance. For a moment, it looked like he might argue. But then he sighed, reached into his pocket and handed her the fare. Nasir watched the exchange through the mirror. This time there was something close to approval in his eyes. By midday the sun hung high, casting sharp light over the crowded streets. Sweat clung to Habiba's skin, her clothes sticking to her back, her legs growing heavier with each step. But she kept moving, because now she wasn't just surviving, she was proving something. To them, to herself. It was during the afternoon route that it happened. The bus stopped near a quieter part of the city, an area with wider roads and larger buildings where the noise of the transport yard felt distant. A man stepped onto the bus, well-dressed, calm, composed. Habiba recognized him instantly. Musa. For a brief moment, her breath caught. He looked different in daylight, more defined, more refined, but his eyes were the same, steady, observant. He didn't greet her, didn't acknowledge anything from the night before. He simply handed her the fare without hesitation and took a seat near the middle of the bus. Habiba accepted the money silently. But her mind was no longer steady. Why was he here? Why this bus out of all the buses in the city? Why hers? She moved through the aisle, continuing her work, but her awareness of him remained. Every time she passed his seat, she could feel his gaze, not intrusive, not uncomfortable, but present, watching, noticing. At one point, an argument broke out between two passengers over seating. Voices rose, tempers flared. Habiba stepped in. "Please," she said calmly. "There is space. Let's not fight." "They took my seat," one man insisted. "It is not assigned," the other argued. Habiba assessed the situation quickly, then guided one of them to another spot. "It is the same," she said gently. "You will reach your destination all the same." Her tone remained steady, firm, respectful. The tension eased. Slowly, the argument dissolved. Habiba moved on, but Musa had seen everything. The way she handled pressure, the way she spoke, the way she refused to escalate conflict. Later, as the bus emptied near the end of the route, Musa remained seated. Habiba approached him cautiously. "Is this your stop?" she asked. He looked up at her. "No," he said. She nodded, then turned to continue her work. "Habiba," he called. She paused, turned back. "Yes." There was a brief silence before he spoke again. "You learn fast." The words were simple, but they carried weight. Habiba hesitated. "Thank you," she said quietly. Musa studied her for a moment, then nodded once, and said nothing more. When the bus returned to the yard that evening, Habiba felt a different kind of exhaustion. Not just physical, but something deeper, the kind that came from pushing past limits she didn't know she had. She stepped down slowly, her legs aching. Her children ran toward her immediately. Mama Zainab called, wrapping her arms around her. Habiba smiled softly, holding her close. "You did well today," Amina said. Habiba looked at her, surprised. "You were watching," Amina nodded. "All the time." Habiba's heart warmed. For the first time since everything had fallen apart, she felt something close to pride. Across the yard, Musa stood beside another vehicle, watching quietly. He had seen enough, more than enough, and in his mind a decision was beginning to form. Not rushed, not emotional, but deliberate. Because Habiba was no longer just a woman he had helped on a rainy night. She was something more, someone worth watching, someone worth testing, and without knowing it, Habiba had just stepped into a path far greater than survival, a path that would soon change everything. The routine began to take shape. Days no longer blurred into one endless struggle. Instead, they formed a pattern, hard, exhausting, but steady. Habiba woke before sunrise, prepared her children, and reported to the yard. She called passengers, collected fares, settled disputes, and endured the constant pressure of the road. Each day she improved, each day she grew stronger, and each day Musa returned. At first, Habiba told herself it was coincidence. The city had many routes, many buses. It was possible, reasonable, even that he simply used this line for convenience. But as the days passed, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Same time, same stop, same quiet presence. He would board without hesitation, hand over the exact fare, and take his usual seat. Not too close, not too far. Just enough to observe without drawing attention. He never missed a day. Habiba began to notice the details. The way he dressed, always clean, simple, but refined. The way he sat, upright, composed, never restless like other passengers. The way he watched, not casually, but intentionally. And most of all, the way he listened. He noticed everything. Habiba felt it, and it unsettled her. One afternoon, as the bus moved through a particularly crowded street, Habiba found herself standing near Musa's seat for longer than usual. The aisle was packed and she had little room to move. A woman nearby argued loudly over her fare. "I already paid," she insisted. "You haven't," Habiba replied calmly. "I told you I gave it to the driver." Habiba shook her head. "You must pay here. Everyone pays here." The woman scoffed. "You think I will pay twice?" Habiba held her ground. "Then you will not continue the journey," she said. The tension rose quickly. Other passengers began to watch. Some whispered, others waited curious to see how she would handle it. For a brief moment, doubt flickered inside Habiba. But she pushed it aside. She had learned this already. If she stepped back once, she would lose control. The woman finally sighed in frustration and handed over the money. Habiba accepted it without a word and moved on. But as she turned, she caught Musa's eyes. He wasn't just watching, he was measuring, as if each moment, each decision was part of something larger she couldn't yet see. Later that day, when the bus emptied slightly, Musa spoke again. "Do you trust people easily?" he asked. The question came without warning. Habiba paused, surprised. She considered it carefully before answering. "No," she said. Musa tilted his head slightly. "But you trusted me." Habiba met his gaze. "I trusted the situation," she replied. "Not just you." Musa's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Explain." Habiba shifted her weight slightly, her voice thoughtful. "My children were cold, hungry. I had no options," she said. "You offered help without asking for anything in return. That matters." Musa nodded slowly, and if I had asked for something, he pressed. Habiba didn't hesitate. "Then I would have refused." Her answer came firm, clear, without fear. Musa studied her for a long moment, then leaned back slightly in his seat. "Interesting," he said quietly. That evening after the last trip, Habiba sat outside the bus for a few minutes, resting her tired legs. The yard was quieter now, the noise of the day fading into the background. Her children sat nearby, sharing a small meal she had managed to buy. Amina looked up at her. "Mama," she said softly. "That man, the one who rides the bus every day. Do you know him?" Habiba shook her head. "No, but he knows you," Amina said. Habiba frowned slightly. "What makes you say that?" "He watches you," Amina replied simply. "Not like the others." Habiba didn't answer immediately, because she knew her daughter was right. The next day something changed. Musa boarded as usual, but this time he didn't sit. Instead, he remained near the front, holding on to one of the metal rails as the bus began to move. Habiba noticed immediately. So did Nasir. "Find a seat," Nasir called out. Musa shook his head slightly. "I'm fine." His eyes moved briefly to Habiba, then back to the road ahead. Habiba felt a strange tension settle in her chest. Something was different. She could feel it. Midway through the journey, the bus made a stop near a busy junction. Several new passengers climbed aboard, filling the remaining space quickly. Among them was a man dressed in expensive clothing, gold watch-polished shoes, the kind of presence that drew attention. He looked around with visible discomfort. "This bus is too crowded," he muttered. No one responded. He turned toward Habiba. "How much to sit in front?" he asked. Habiba shook her head. "There is no special seating." The man frowned. "I will pay extra," he said, pulling out money. Habiba didn't move. "All passengers are equal," she replied. The man's expression hardened. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Habiba met his gaze calmly. "No," she said, "and it doesn't change the fare." A few passengers chuckled quietly. The man looked annoyed, but eventually he pocketed the money and moved further inside. Musa had watched everything, without interruption, without expression, but inside, he had seen what he needed to see. When the bus emptied again later, Musa finally spoke. "You turned down money," he said. Habiba nodded. "Yes. Why? Because it wasn't fair," she replied simply. Musa crossed his arms slightly. "Fairness doesn't feed children." Habiba didn't flinch. "No," she agreed, "but losing your integrity costs more." The answer lingered in the air. Musa said nothing for a while. Then quietly, "You are not like most people here." Habiba gave a small, tired smile. "I don't have the luxury to be like most people," she said. That evening, as the bus returned to the yard, Musa remained seated until everyone else had stepped off. Habiba approached him again. "This is the last stop," she said. He stood slowly, but instead of leaving immediately, he paused. "Habiba," he said. She looked at him. "Yes." There was a brief silence. Then, "You think this is where your story ends?" he asked. The question caught her off guard. Habiba frowned slightly. "I don't think about endings," she said. "Only the next step." Musa nodded. "That's why you are still standing," he said. He stepped off the bus, and this time he didn't look back. From a distance, Baba Karim had been watching. He had seen the interactions, the patterns, the subtle shifts. He turned to Musa as the man approached. "You are taking interest in her," Baba Karim said. Musa didn't deny it. "She is different," he replied. Baba Karim folded his arms. "And what do you plan to do?" Musa's gaze drifted back toward Habiba, who now sat with her children, unaware of the conversation. "Not yet," he said, "but soon." Because the truth was, this was never just about a bus ride or a chance encounter in the rain. Habiba had been tested, observed, measured, and she had passed every silent trial so far. But the real test, the one that would change everything, was still coming. The past has a way of returning when you least expect it. For Habiba, it came on a day that had started like any other early exhausting predictable. The bus routes were the same, the passengers just as impatient, the heat just as relentless. She had begun to find a rhythm in it all, a fragile sense of control in a life that had once completely unraveled. Until she saw him. Sadiq Bello. He stood at the edge of the road as the bus slowed to a stop, his figure unmistakable even from a distance. The same posture, the same face she had once memorized in love, now etched with something else. Fatigue, desperation, and a trace of something he had never shown before. Uncertainty. Habiba's breath caught. For a moment, everything around her faded, the noise, the voices, the movement of the bus. Only him remained, Mama Amina whispered, noticing the sudden tension in her body. Habiba didn't answer. She couldn't, because Sadiq was already stepping onto the bus. The moment he entered, the air shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. Some passengers glanced at him briefly, then returned to their own thoughts. To them, he was just another man boarding a bus. But to Habiba, he was everything she had lost, everything that had broken her, everything she had fought to survive. Sadiq looked around slowly, his eyes scanning the interior, until they landed on her. For a second, neither of them moved. Then he took a step closer. "Habiba," he said. Her name sounded different coming from his mouth now. Not warm, not familiar, just heavy. Habiba forced herself to breathe. "Fair," she said quietly, holding out her hand. Sadiq hesitated, then let out a small, almost bitter laugh. "So, this is what you do now?" he asked, glancing around the bus. Habiba didn't react. "Fair," she repeated. Her voice was steady, controlled. Sadiq reached into his pocket and handed her the money. Their fingers brushed briefly. The contact felt foreign, unwanted. Habiba took the money and moved on without another word. But inside, her heart was racing. Sadiq didn't sit immediately. Instead, he remained standing near the front, watching her as she moved through the aisle, collecting fares, giving directions, managing passengers. His gaze followed her. Every step, every word, every interaction, and what he saw unsettled him. Because this was not the same woman he had left in the rain. This, Habiba, stood differently, spoke differently, carried herself with a quiet strength he did not remember. She wasn't broken. She wasn't begging. She wasn't waiting. She was surviving. Without him. After a few minutes, he finally took a seat, but he didn't stop watching. Musa noticed. From his usual position, his eyes flickered between the two of them, silent, observant understanding, more than either of them realized. The journey continued, but for Habiba, time felt distorted. Every movement felt heavier, every step more deliberate. She avoided looking at Sadiq, avoided thinking about what he might say, or worse, what he might want. Eventually, as the bus cleared out and only a few passengers remained, Sadiq stood up again. This time he walked toward her. "Habiba," he said softly. She turned. not out of willingness, but necessity. Yes, she replied. There was no emotion in her voice, just distance. Sadiq hesitated. Up close, the changes in him were more visible. His clothes, though still neat, were not new. His face looked thinner. His eyes, less certain. "I've been looking for you," he said. Habiba said nothing. "I didn't know where you went," he continued. "No one could tell me." Habiba folded her arms slightly. "You didn't look very hard," she replied. The words were calm, but sharp. Sadiq flinched. "I made a mistake," he said quickly. "I know that now." Habiba's expression didn't change. "A mistake," she repeated. "Is that what you call it?" Sadiq ran a hand through his hair. "I was under pressure," he said. "Things were difficult. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking clearly enough to throw your children into the street," Habiba said. Her voice remained steady, but her eyes held something deeper. Pain, controlled, contained, but still there. Sadiq looked away briefly. "That woman," he started, then paused. Habiba didn't ask. She didn't need to. "She's gone," he said finally. "She left, took everything with her." Habiba nodded slowly. "I see." There was no satisfaction in her tone, no anger, just acknowledgement. "I have nothing now," Sadiq added, his voice softer. Habiba met his gaze. For the first time she said, "You understand what that feels like." The words landed heavily. Sadiq swallowed. "I want to fix this," he said, "for the children, for us." Habiba stared at him for a long moment. Then she shook her head. "There is no us anymore," she said. Sadiq stepped closer. "Habiba, please." "No," she cut in, not loudly, but firmly, the kind of no that didn't leave room for argument. "You made your choice," she continued. "You didn't just leave me. You abandoned your children. I regret it," he said quickly. "Regret doesn't rebuild what you destroyed," she replied. The bus fell quiet. Even the remaining passengers could feel the tension. Musa watched without interruption. Every word, every reaction, every truth. Sadiq lowered his voice. "I can change," he said. Habiba shook her head again. "You should have changed when we still had a home," she said. The words cut deeper than anything she had said before. Sadiq looked at her as if seeing her for the first time, not as the woman he once controlled, but as someone beyond his reach. The bus slowed to a stop. "This is your stop," Habiba said. Sadiq didn't move. "Please get down." For a second it seemed like he might argue, but then something in her expression stopped him. Not anger, not hatred, but finality. He stepped back slowly, then turned and walked toward the door. Before stepping off, he paused. "Habiba," he said. She didn't respond. "I will come back," he added. Habiba didn't look at him, and that was her answer. The door closed. The bus moved again, and just like that, he was gone, again, but this time he was the one left behind. Habiba stood still for a moment, her chest rising and falling slowly. Then she took a breath and returned to her work, because this time she wasn't the one who had lost everything. He was. From his seat, Musa watched her carefully, not with curiosity anymore, but with certainty. She had passed another test, not of strength, but of choice, and she had chosen dignity over desperation, over fear, over the past. Musa leaned back slightly, his decision now clearer than ever. The time was coming. Soon he would step forward, and when he did, Habiba's life would change again. But this time, not because she was broken, but because she had proven she could never be. The days after Sadiq's return were quieter, but not easier. If anything, they carried a different kind of weight. Not the chaos of being thrown out into the rain, not the raw panic of survival, but something deeper, something that settled inside Habiba and refused to leave. A memory, a reminder, a test she had passed, but not forgotten. She continued her routine without interruption, waking early, preparing her children, working through long hours, returning to the bus each day with the same quiet determination. But inside, something had shifted. There was no more doubt, no more waiting for something to be fixed. That part of her life was closed. Completely. Sadiq did not return to the bus. At least not in the days that followed. Habiba noticed. Of course she did. But she did not ask. She did not wonder. She simply moved forward. Musa, however, did not disappear. If anything, his presence became more deliberate. He still boarded the bus regularly, still observed, still said little. But now, there was intention behind his silence. A direction. One afternoon, as the bus completed its final route, Musa remained seated until the last passenger stepped off. Habiba approached him slowly. "This is the last stop," she said. Musa stood, but instead of leaving, he turned to face her fully. "Walk with me," he said. The request caught her off guard. Habiba hesitated. Her instinct was to refuse, but something in his tone, calm, steady, without pressure, made her pause. She glanced briefly toward her children, who waited near the edge of the yard, with Amina watching carefully. "I won't be long," Habiba said to her. Amina nodded. Then Habiba turned back to Musa. "All right," she said. They walked in silence at first, away from the noise of the yard, toward a quieter section where the parked buses cast long shadows across the ground. The air was still, almost too still. "What do you want to talk about?" Habiba asked finally. Musa stopped walking, then turned to face her. "Your future," he said. Habiba frowned slightly. "My future," Musa nodded. "You are working hard," he continued. "You are learning fast. But this," he gestured lightly toward the buses, "this is not where you are meant to stay." Habiba crossed her arms slightly. "And how do you know that?" she asked. Musa held her gaze. "Because I have been watching you," he said. The honesty of the statement didn't sound threatening. It sounded deliberate, measured. Habiba didn't react immediately, watching me for what she asked. "To understand you," Musa replied. "And have you?" she pressed. Musa paused, then said quietly, "Yes." Habiba let out a small breath. "And what did you understand?" she asked. Musa didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. He handed it to her. "Look at this," he said. Habiba hesitated, then took the paper. She unfolded it slowly. Her eyes scanned the contents. At first, she didn't fully understand what she was seeing. But then, her expression changed. "This," she whispered. "It is a job offer," Musa said. Habiba looked up at him. "A supervisor position," he continued. "Higher pay, better conditions, stability." Habiba stared at the paper again. Her hands tightened slightly. "You are offering me this?" she asked. "Yes." "Why?" she asked immediately. Musa didn't hesitate. "Because you earned it." The answer was simple, direct, but Habiba wasn't convinced. "No," she said, shaking her head slightly. "People don't just give opportunities like this without a reason." Musa studied her. "You think there is something else?" he asked. "I know there is," she replied. Silence settled between them. Then Musa spoke. "I own this company," he said. The words were quiet, but they changed everything. Habiba froze. Her mind struggled to process what she had just heard. "You?" What she asked. "I am the owner of this transport company," Musa repeated. "Every bus, every route, this entire yard." Habiba stared at him. The pieces began to fall into place. The way Baba Karim had reacted. The way Musa moved without explanation. the way no one questioned him, the way he had been watching her from the beginning. "You knew," she said slowly. "From the night, you knew everything." Musa nodded once. "I saw you that night," he said, "and I chose to watch what you would do next." Habiba felt a mix of emotions rise inside her. Shock, confusion, and something else. Hurt. "You were testing me," she said. Musa didn't deny it. "I was observing," he corrected. Habiba shook her head. "That is the same thing." Musa remained calm. "No," he said. "A test has an outcome decided in advance. Observation allows the truth to reveal itself." Habiba let out a small disbelieving breath. "And what truth did you find?" she asked. "That you are stronger than your circumstances," he replied. "That you do not compromise your integrity. That you stand your ground even when it costs you." His voice remained steady, unemotional, but his words carried weight. Habiba looked down at the document again, then back at him. "And now you want to reward me?" she asked. "I want to give you an opportunity," Musa said. "What you do with it is your choice." Habiba's grip on the paper tightened. Her mind raced. This was everything she needed. A stable job, a better life for her children, security, respect, everything she had been fighting for. And yet, something inside her hesitated. "You watched me struggle," she said slowly. "You watched my children go hungry. You saw everything." Musa didn't look away. "Yes. And you did nothing?" she asked. "I did something," he replied. "I gave you a starting point." Habiba shook her head. "A bus ride and directions are not the same as this," she said, holding up the paper. "No," Musa agreed. "They are not." "Then why wait?" she pressed. Musa's expression remained unchanged. "Because if I had given you this on the first day," he said, "you would not have become who you are now." The answer settled heavily between them. Habiba didn't respond immediately. Because part of her knew he was right, but that didn't make it easier to accept. The wind shifted slightly, carrying the distant sounds of the yard back toward them. Habiba looked down at the paper one more time. Then slowly, she folded it and handed it back. Musa didn't take it immediately. "You are refusing?" he asked. Habiba met his gaze. "I am thinking," she said. Musa nodded slowly. "Good," he replied. Because this moment was not about desperation. It was about choice. And for the first time in a long time, Habiba had one. Behind them, unseen but not unnoticed, Baba Karim watched from a distance. He crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "She is not like the others," he muttered to himself. No, she wasn't, and whatever decision she made next would define everything that followed. Kethuk fan moimot, tieptuk yukau vietju mot nanghin jen mot nanghin, hetram tu theokui jin fan moi hai. The offer did not leave Habiba's mind. Even after she handed the paper back, even after Musa walked away without pressing her for an answer, even after the noise of the transport yard swallowed the moment whole, it stayed with her, quiet, persistent, like a question she could not ignore. That night, as her children slept on the bus seats beside her, Habiba remained awake longer than usual. The dim interior light cast soft shadows across their faces. Amina slept closest to her, one arm resting protectively over Zainab. Yusuf lay on the other side, his breathing slow and steady. They looked peaceful, but Habiba knew better. Peace was temporary, fragile, and often borrowed. She leaned back slightly, staring at the ceiling. A supervisor position, better pay, stability. The words repeated in her mind. It was everything she had been working toward, everything she needed. So why did it feel so heavy? Because it didn't feel earned in the way she understood. It felt given, and that made her uneasy. Not because she didn't trust Musa, but because she had learned through pain that nothing in life came without a cost. "Am I ready for this?" she whispered softly to herself. No answer came, only silence. The next morning the yard felt different, not visibly, not in sound or movement, but to Habiba, everything felt sharper, more deliberate, every glance, every word, every step she took. Nasir noticed it first. "You are distracted," he said as they prepared for the first route. Habiba shook her head. "No, you are," he insisted. "You missed 2 passengers already." Habiba paused. He was right. She had been slower, less focused. Her mind wasn't fully present. "I will fix it," she said. Nasir watched her for a moment, then nodded. "Good," he replied. "Because this work does not wait for your thoughts." Habiba didn't argue. She adjusted, refocused, and stepped back into the rhythm. But the world didn't wait for her to decide. It forced her. By midday the whispers began. At first they were subtle, quiet conversations between workers, glances that lingered a little too long. Then came the looks from passengers, judgmental, curious, unkind. Habiba felt it before she understood it. Something was wrong. Then at one stop, a woman refused to board. "Isn't that her?" the woman said to her friend, loud enough to be heard. "The one whose husband threw her out." Her friend nodded. "Yes, I heard she was living in the street." Habiba froze. The words spread quickly, like fire. "She's the one working here now." "Can you trust someone like that with money? I heard her husband left because she was difficult." The narrative twisted, changed, turned against her. Habiba felt the ground shift beneath her again. Not physically, but socially. The same world that ignored her suffering now judged her survival. Inside the bus, the tension grew. Some passengers became hesitant, others more confrontational. "Count my change again," one man demanded. "You think I will cheat you?" Habiba asked calmly. "I don't know you," he replied, "and I don't trust stories." Habiba said nothing. She simply counted the money again and handed it back. Later, Nasir pulled her aside briefly. "What is going on?" he asked. Habiba hesitated. "People are talking," she said. Nasir frowned. "They always talk. This is different," she replied. He studied her face, then sighed. "This place is not kind to weakness," he said. "If they smell it, they will use it." "I am not weak," Habiba said. "I know," Nasir replied, "but they don't." The situation worsened by the afternoon. At the yard, a group of workers gathered near one of the buses, speaking openly now. "She shouldn't be here. This job is not for people like her. What if she causes trouble for the company?" Habiba heard everything, every word, every judgment. She stood still, listening, absorbing, but not reacting, because reacting would confirm their narrative, and she refused to give them that. Then, the final blow came. Baba Karim called her into the office. His expression was serious, not harsh, but not soft either. "Sit," he said. Habiba obeyed. There was a pause before he spoke again. "Complaints have been made," he said. Habiba felt her chest tighten. "About me?" she asked. "Yes." "What kind of complaints?" "Trust," he replied simply. "People are questioning whether you should be handling money." Habiba's hands clenched slightly. "I have done nothing wrong," she said. "I know," Baba Karim replied. The words surprised her. "You know," she repeated. "I have been watching you," he said, "just like others have." Habiba swallowed. "Then why am I here?" she asked. "Because perception matters," he said, "and right now perception is not on your side." Habiba looked down briefly, then back up. "What are you saying?" she asked. Baba Karim leaned forward slightly. "I am saying your position is unstable," he said. The word landed heavily. Unstable, again, everything she had built, everything she had fought for, now at risk. Again. Habiba stood slowly. "I understand," she said. Baba Karim watched her. "You are not going to argue?" he asked. Habiba shook her head. "No." "Why, because I have learned something," she said. "And what is that?" "That fighting noise with noise only creates more noise," she replied. Baba Karim leaned back slightly, considering, then nodded. "Good answer," he said. Habiba stepped out of the office. The yard felt louder now, harsher, more hostile. She walked past the group of workers without stopping, without reacting. But inside, everything was shaking. Because this was not just about a job. This was about survival, again. Across the yard, Musa stood watching. He had heard the complaints, seen the reactions, understood the shift. This was the real test. Not strength, not skill, but pressure. Social pressure, reputation, doubt. The kind of pressure that breaks people, even when they are strong. He watched Habiba carefully, her posture, her movement, her silence. She didn't fight. She didn't collapse. She didn't beg. She held herself together. Even now, even here, Musa turned slightly. His decision was no longer forming. It was ready. Because Habiba had reached the edge. Again, and what she needed now was not another test. It was truth, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard. Habiba sat beside her children, quiet, still, thinking. She didn't know what would happen next. Didn't know if she would still have this job tomorrow. Didn't know if everything would fall apart again. But one thing was clear. She would not run, not anymore. And somewhere behind her, footsteps approached. Calm, deliberate, familiar. Musa, this time not as an observer, but as someone ready to step forward and change everything. The whispers did not fade. They grew louder. By the next morning, they had spread beyond the transport yard, into the streets, into the small shops nearby, into the conversations of passengers who boarded the bus already carrying opinions about Habiba before they even saw her. It wasn't just doubt anymore, it was judgment. And judgment, once it takes root, is harder to fight than hunger. Habiba stood beside the bus, calling out the route as she had done every day. City center, fast trip, no delay. Her voice was steady, but the response was slower. People hesitated before boarding. Some chose other buses, others stepped in reluctantly, watching her closely, as if waiting for her to make a mistake. Habiba noticed everything, but she didn't change her rhythm. She couldn't. If she allowed their doubt to shake her, she would lose everything. Again. Inside the bus, the atmosphere was tense. A man handed her money, then immediately pulled it back. "Wait," he said. "Count it properly." Habiba held out her hand. "I will count it," she replied calmly. He placed the money back into her palm, watching closely as she counted each note, each coin. When she handed him his change, he checked it again, twice, then nodded reluctantly. No apology, no acknowledgement, just suspicion. Another passenger leaned toward the woman beside her. "That's the one," she whispered. "The one with the story." The woman glanced at Habiba, then looked away quickly, as if contact alone might carry something undesirable. Habiba moved through the aisle with quiet control. Every step measured, every action precise. She gave them nothing to confirm their doubts, nothing to use against her. But inside, the pressure was building. At the next stop, a group of young men boarded the bus together. Loud, confident, unbothered. One of them looked directly at Habiba. "So you are the famous one," he said with a smirk. Habiba didn't respond. She held out her hand. "Fair." The man laughed. "You think I will give you money just like that?" he said. "Yes," Habiba replied. Her tone didn't change, didn't rise, didn't fall, just firm. The other men chuckled. Maybe we should ride for free, one of them added. Habiba stepped slightly forward, blocking the aisle. No payment, no ride, she said. The bus fell quiet. Passengers watched, waiting, because this was what they expected. The moment she would fail, the moment she would lose control, the moment she would confirm every rumor. The young man stared at her, testing, pushing, then slowly. He reached into his pocket, pulled out the money, and handed it to her. "Relax," he said. "I was just joking." Habiba took the fare. No reaction, no relief. She moved on, and the bus breathed again. At the yard, the tension was no less. Workers watched her openly now, not hiding their opinions, not softening their words. She won't last. They should have never hired her. This is what happens when you bend the rules. Habiba walked past them, head up, steps steady, but the weight was there, pressing, constant. Then Musa stepped forward, not from the shadows, not from a distance, but directly into the center of the yard. His presence shifted everything. It wasn't loud, but it was immediate, because everyone knew him, even if they didn't fully understand him. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't call attention. He simply stood and waited. The conversation slowed, then stopped. One by one, the workers turned. The energy changed. Respect replaced noise. Musa's eyes moved across the yard, taking in everything: the workers, the buses, the atmosphere, and finally, Habiba. She stood near the bus, unaware at first of what was happening behind her, until the silence reached her. She turned slowly and saw him, not as a passenger, not as an observer, but as something else, something undeniable. Musa stepped forward, calm, controlled, deliberate, and when he spoke, his voice carried, not through volume, but through authority. "I have been listening," he said. No one interrupted. "I have heard the complaints," he continued. The workers shifted slightly, uncomfortable now, uncertain. Musa turned toward them fully. "About trust," he said, "about reputation, about whether she belongs here." His words were clear, precise, each one landing exactly where it needed to. Then he did something unexpected. He called out, "Habiba." Her name cut through the space. She stepped forward slowly, confused but composed. "Yes," she replied. Musa looked at her, not as a stranger, not as a test, but as someone he had already chosen. "Tell them," he said. Habiba frowned slightly. "Tell them what?" she asked. "Tell them what you have done wrong," Musa said. The question hung in the air, sharp, unavoidable. Habiba stood still for a moment, then spoke. "I have done nothing wrong," she said. Her voice didn't shake, didn't waver. It carried, because it was true. Musa nodded once, then turned back to the workers. "You hear that?" he said. Silence. No one responded. Musa took another step forward. "This woman has worked here under observation," he said. "Every fare she has collected has been accounted for. Every complaint against her has been based on rumor, not fact." The words spread through the yard. Heavy, final. One of the workers shifted nervously. "But people are talking," he said. Musa's gaze snapped to him. "And since when?" he replied. "Calmly did this company operate on gossip?" The man lowered his head. No answer. Musa continued. "If we judge people by their past," he said, "then none of us would be standing here today." The statement hit deeper than anyone expected, because it was true. For all of them. Then Musa turned back to Habiba, and this time there was no distance, no separation, only truth. "You have nothing to prove," he said. Habiba didn't speak, but her eyes. Her eyes held everything. Musa faced the yard again. "From today," he said, "this discussion ends. Anyone who has a problem with her has a problem with me." The words landed like a final verdict. No room for argument. No space for resistance. Silence followed. Not the tense silence from before, but something different, something resolved. Baba Karim stepped forward slightly, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, once, slowly, and that was enough. The yard returned to life, but differently, quieter, more controlled. The whispers were gone, not erased, but silenced. Habiba stood where she was, still processing, still absorbing. Musa walked past her, without stopping, without looking back, as if what he had done required no acknowledgement. But Habiba knew. This moment, this shift, this protection, it changed everything. Not because he saved her, but because he revealed the truth, at the right time, in the right way. And for the first time since everything had fallen apart, Habiba felt something new. Not just strength, not just survival, but respect. And this time it wasn't given out of pity. It was earned. The yard did not return to what it used to be. It moved forward, but it remembered. Not in whispers anymore, but in the way people looked at Habiba now. The same eyes that once doubted her now watched with quiet respect, not admiration. Yet know that would take time. But something had shifted. The noise had been replaced by awareness, and awareness, when guided by truth, could become respect. Habiba felt it immediately, not in words, but in space. People no longer blocked her path, no longer questioned every coin she touched, no longer laughed under their breath when she passed. Instead, they moved aside, watched, listened, and sometimes nodded. It was small, but it mattered. Nasir noticed it too. "You see," he said one morning as they prepared for the first route, "the same people who doubted you. Now they don't speak." Habiba adjusted her scarf quietly. "They are still thinking," she replied. Nasir smirked slightly. "Let them think. You already proved what matters." Habiba didn't respond, because to her it wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about stability, about holding on to what she had built. The work continued, but now it felt different, lighter, not easier, but clearer. Habiba moved through her duties with confidence that no longer came from effort alone. It came from certainty. She knew what she was doing. She knew who she was. And, most importantly, she no longer needed anyone to confirm it. But life was not finished testing her. Not yet. That afternoon, as the sun burned high above the city, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the yard. Sadiq Bello, again. But this time he did not walk with hesitation. He walked with urgency, with intention, and that alone made Habiba uneasy. She saw him before he reached her. Her body stiffened slightly, but she didn't move, didn't retreat, didn't prepare to run. Because this time, she wasn't the same woman he had left behind. Sadiq approached quickly. "Habiba," he called. His voice carried across the yard. A few heads turned. The moment didn't go unnoticed. Habiba faced him, calm, controlled. "What do you want?" she asked. Sadiq stopped in front of her, breathing slightly heavier than before. "I need to talk to you," he said. "There is nothing left to talk about," she replied. Sadiq shook his head. "There is," he insisted. "You just don't want to hear it." Habiba crossed her arms. "You are right," she said. "I don't." The simplicity of her answer hit him harder than anger would have. Sadiq glanced around, at the workers, at the buses, at the life she had built without him. And something inside him tightened. "You've changed," he said. Habiba nodded slightly. "Yes." Sadiq let out a breath. "I can see that," he added. There was a pause. "Then I lost everything," he said. Habiba didn't react. "I told you that already," she replied. Sadiq stepped closer. "No. You don't understand," he said. "It's worse now." Habiba held his gaze. I understand exactly, she said. You are facing the consequences of your choices. Sadiq's expression hardened slightly. I came here because I need help, he said. The words hung in the air. Unexpected, heavy. Habiba blinked once. You need help, she repeated. Yes, he said. And you came to me, she asked. Sadiq nodded. Habiba let out a small, almost disbelieving breath. You threw me and your children into the street, she said. And now you are asking me for help. Sadiq swallowed. I was wrong, he said. I admit that. That doesn't change what happened, she replied. I know, he said quickly. But I am asking you to give me another chance. Habiba shook her head immediately. No. The answer was instant, final. Sadiq's voice rose slightly. Habiba, please. No, she repeated. This time stronger, clearer, unshakable. I am not the same woman you left, she said. I don't beg anymore. I don't wait for people to fix what they broke. Sadiq's face tightened. I am not asking you to beg, he said. I am asking you to forgive. Habiba's eyes softened slightly. Not with weakness, but with truth. Forgiveness, she said slowly, is not the same as going back. The words landed quietly, but deeply. Sadiq looked at her, really looked, and, for the first time, he understood. She wasn't angry. She wasn't holding on to pain to punish him. She had simply moved on. What about the children, he asked. Habiba didn't hesitate. They are safe, she said, with me. Sadiq nodded slowly. I want to see them, he said. Habiba considered it, then replied, You can. Sadiq looked surprised. But you will not disrupt their peace, she added. You will not confuse them, and you will not make promises you cannot keep. Sadiq nodded quickly. I won't. Habiba held his gaze for a moment longer, then stepped aside slightly. They are over there, she said. Sadiq turned, saw them, Amina, Yusuf, Zainab, sitting together, laughing quietly, for the first time in a long time. He hesitated, because in that moment, he realized something painful. They were okay, without him. Behind them, Musa stood at a distance, watching, not interfering, not stepping in. Because this was not his moment. This was hers. Habiba remained where she was, still, calm, unmoved. She had faced the past, looked it in the eyes, and chosen not to return. Sadiq walked slowly toward the children, carefully, as if unsure of his place, and maybe, for the first time, he truly didn't have one. The yard continued to move around them. Buses arriving, voices calling, life continuing. But for Habiba, everything had become clear. She no longer needed closure. She no longer needed validation. She no longer needed to prove anything. She had already won. Not by defeating anyone, but by choosing herself. And as the sun began to set once again, casting long shadows across the yard, Habiba stood tall, not as a victim, not as someone broken, but as someone who had rebuilt herself from nothing, and this time nothing could take that away from her. The evening air carried a quiet calm that Habiba had not felt in a long time, not because life had suddenly become easy, not because the past had disappeared, but because something inside her had finally settled. She was no longer running, no longer reacting, no longer surviving moment to moment. She was standing firmly, fully, on her own. Sadiq's visit did not change her path. If anything, it confirmed it. He came, he saw, he realized, and then he left again. But this time it was different. He didn't leave with pride. He didn't leave with anger. He left with something far heavier, understanding, and perhaps for the first time in his life, regret that could not be undone. The children adjusted quickly, faster than Habiba expected. Children always do. They live in the present, not the past, not the future, just Now. And in their now they were safe. They had food, they had their mother, they had each other. And, slowly, that was enough. Amina became quieter, but stronger. She helped Habiba more without being asked. Watched everything closely. Learned quickly. Yusuf began to smile again, small at first, then more freely. He started talking about school, about friends he wanted to have, about a life beyond the bus. And little Zainab. She laughed, truly laughed. The kind of laughter that filled space and pushed out fear. Habiba noticed everything, and every time she did, her heart felt fuller, not because she had gained everything, but because she had not lost what mattered most. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into something more stable, something real. Habiba continued working, but now her presence carried weight, not just as a worker, but as someone others observed differently. Some even came to her for advice. "How do you deal with difficult passengers?" one new conductor asked. Habiba smiled slightly. "You stay calm," she said, "and you don't let their anger become yours." Another asked, "How do you keep going when everything feels against you?" Habiba paused, then replied, "You remember why you started." Musa watched all of it, not from afar anymore, but from a place of quiet certainty. He had made his decision, and this time he would not delay. One afternoon, he called Habiba again, but this time not in the shadows of the yard, not in quiet conversation, but in the office, with Baba Karim present, with intention. Habiba entered the room slowly, her posture calm, her eyes steady. "You called for me?" she asked. Musa nodded. "Yes." He gestured toward the chair. "Sit." Habiba obeyed. Baba Karim stood beside the desk, arms crossed, watching quietly. Musa placed a document in front of her. The same one. The job offer. But this time it wasn't just paper. It was final. "I am offering this to you again," Musa said. His voice was calm, but firm. Habiba looked at the document, then at him. "I told you I needed time," she said. Musa nodded. "And now you have had it." Silence filled the room. Not tense, not uncomfortable, but important. Habiba took a slow breath. "What changes if I accept this?" she asked. Musa didn't hesitate. Everything he said. "You move from survival to stability. You move from being tested to being trusted." Habiba held his gaze. "And what do you expect from me?" she asked. Musa leaned slightly forward. "Exactly what you have already shown," he said. "Integrity, discipline, strength, no more, no less." Habiba looked down at the paper again. This time it felt different, not like something given, but something reached, earned, built. She thought of the night in the rain, the bus stop, the cold, the hunger, the fear. Then she thought of now, her children, their laughter, their safety, their future. And she understood. This wasn't about accepting help. This was about accepting growth. Habiba picked up the pen, paused for a moment, then signed. The room remained quiet, but something had changed completely. Baba Karim nodded once, respectfully, not as a superior, but as someone acknowledging another. Musa took the document, folded it, set it aside, then looked at Habiba. "You made the right choice," he said. Habiba nodded. "I made my choice," she replied. That evening, Habiba walked back to her children with something new. Not just hope, not just strength, but direction. Mama Amina asked. Habiba smiled. "We are moving forward," she said, and for the first time those words weren't just a promise. They were a reality. The yard continued, the buses moved, life carried on. But Habiba was no longer just part of it. She was shaping it. And somewhere in the distance, Sadiq watched. Not close, not involved, but aware. Of what he had lost, of what she had become. And this time, there was no door to close, no control to reclaim, no story to rewrite. Because Habiba's story was no longer his to touch. It belonged to her. And she had written it. Through pain, through strength, through choice. And now she would live it. Fully, freely, without fear. Because the woman who once stood in the rain with nothing had become someone no storm could ever break again.
Life does not always break us in loud, dramatic ways. Sometimes it breaks us quietly through rejection, abandonment, and moments when we feel completely unseen. Habiba's story reminds us that strength is not found in never falling,
but in refusing to stay down. She did not rise because someone saved her. She rose because she chose to keep moving, even when every step felt impossible.
There will be people who doubt you, people who misunderstand your journey, people who judge your scars without knowing your battles. But none of that defines you. What defines you is what you do next. Habiba chose dignity over desperation, growth over fear, and most importantly, she chose herself.
If this story touched your heart, tell us, where are you watching from and what part of Habiba's journey stayed with you the most? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the strength we all carry inside. Because sometimes, the hardest roads lead to the strongest versions of ourselves.